welcome everyone to day 2 to our California Labor Laboratory annual conference. I first want to introduce Victor Rubin, who's going to give us his impressions of yesterday's conference. And then we will move to our first speaker. So just to remind you, Dr. Rubin was introduced yesterday. But let me remind you that he is a consultant to the California Labor Laboratory on opportunities for policy change arising from the activities of the lab. So Dr. Rubin, take it away.
Thank you, Christina, and thanks to all the conference organizers for what was a very powerful day yesterday, very colorful, exciting, daunting challenges, which we heard about from about a dozen different presenters. Let me just take a couple minutes to remind us of some of what we heard and set us up for today, which, in addition to having more of those challenges in other sectors, is going to spend a lot of time on different strategies for positive change. We began, of course, by hearing from Acting U.S. Secretary of Labor Julie Su, well known to us in California for her career as an advocate for workers' rights and as Secretary of the Workforce Development and Labor Agency. She reminded us how important all the issues that we're discussing in this conference, and indeed all the work of the Labor Lab, is to the Biden administration and to the larger struggle to create healthy, safe, and meaningful work in a changing workplace. And we're very grateful that she took the time to do that. We then talked with Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, the head of the California Federation of Labor and a former legislator who had been in the legislature taking the lead on many of the issues we're talking about today. And she reminded us that many of the issues facing so-called gig workers and also other types of contingent labor, and we'll get back to all those different types in a moment, were questions of misclassification, where de facto employers were contending that all the drivers and all the people doing app-based work and other kinds of work were not their employees, but independent contractors. And there's a whole history of court decisions, most notably the Dynamex decision, and then the legislation, which she championed, AB 5, and then the counter to that, the Proposition 22, which have played out over the last few years, and there'll be another court hearing about Prop 22 shortly. So her point was that the core issues haven't changed, that people still need the basic rights and protections of employees, of being employees, and also that in addition to AB 5, Prop 22, that the larger question of enforcement of laws that California puts on the books and regulations that California has is critically important. So she spoke a lot about expanding the use of public injunctions for labor relief and other aspects of enforcement. This led us into our first main data presentation of the day by Ed Yellen and Laura Trupin of the Labor Lab about the Work and Health Survey. And the details of that you can see on the Labor Lab website. There was a webinar about it not long ago. There will be other presentations as we go along. Many, many findings, of course, and we're putting that in the chat right now. But perhaps the simplest and most important thing to say is that non-traditional work of various kinds is growing, but that it is, for most people who do it, their main job, not something to do on the side. And therefore, how much they get paid, how many hours they get, and the conditions under which they work become absolutely central. So we're exploring through the Work and Health Survey the details of those experiences for a good cross-section of California. It's a way to give workers' voices and experiences a place in the public debate. And we had a subsequent discussion with Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher about how the data could apply to the current debates. And I think you'll find the whole conversation, if you choose to look at it again, if you didn't see it yesterday, or if you didn't see it yesterday, very helpful. We then moved into two segments regarding two of the most critical sectors of the California economy, higher education and healthcare. Professor Alfredo Carlos of Cal State Dominguez Hills, who's active in the faculty union and indeed quite knowledgeable and active in all of the labor organizing around the CSU, gave us an orientation to how that struggle is going. And he characterized and showed lots of data to support his characterization of the CSU as becoming very, very corporatized, very bureaucratized, very lawyered up, if you will, and that student employees need to be organized, academic staff, all the professional staff and blue-collar staff at the universities, as well as the faculty, need strong labor representation in order to create a university that actually works for students and actually works for the faculty and the people who live there. The data is familiar to you of the declining proportion of regular faculty and then larger use and exploitation of lecturers and the difficulties that students and staff have affording housing and the cost of living, particularly in the major metropolitan areas of California. And he characterized the issue as not so much an absolute lack of funding for the CSU, but more the priorities which the administration puts into place rather than an absolute need for a huge amount of additional money. Dr. Carlos was followed by a panel which he joined of people who are leaders in different types of organizing, of student assistants, of academic staff, and of faculty. And we had a very robust discussion of how that union organizing is going, what the salient issues are, what the pushback is from the administration, and often what the attempts to undo labor organizing looks like. We then, after some breaks and lunch, moved on to the healthcare sector, an enormous and very, very diverse sector in California. Dr. Bianca Frogner from the University of Washington provided extensive and very helpful details about the nature of the healthcare workforce and the ways in which the problems faced by workers at all levels of the system are severe, but are felt most prominently by women, by people of color, and that this is a combination of years of how the workplace is organized, how credentialing operates, the nature of jobs, but it's being exacerbated now by the corporate structure of healthcare and ways in which nurses' jobs, nursing assistants' jobs, home healthcare providers, all of whom are facing more and more challenges to have make a viable living and have a healthy and safe workplace. After Dr. Faulkner's presentation, she was joined by an extensive panel, people working on the front lines in healthcare and in organizing and doing research about frontline workers in healthcare. And it was a very, very powerful explanation of all the different ways in which the system is not only traditionally, but now increasingly using algorithms and other new forms of corporate restructuring to make the jobs difficult for frontline workers. And as one panelist pointed out, it isn't so much that there's a shortage of nurses, it's that the conditions are being created that cause the job to be undoable or unsustainable, perhaps, and contributing to huge amounts of turnover. And I really appreciated that the panel focused not only on nurses, but on home health care and long-term care workers as well. So we're set up with quite a lot of material to think about for today. And I'd like to, having taken the allotted time, turn it back to Christina to get us underway.